They say time heals everything, but they never tell you that some memories don't fade. They just stop bleeding. Mine didn't stop because I moved on. It stopped because I ran out of tears. I remember the night I realized he never loved me. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no breaking plates, no scenes straight out of a movie. Just silence. A kind of silence that screamed louder than any argument could. If you've ever loved someone who only pretended to love you back, you'll understand every word I'm about to say. Before I begin, if you've ever had your heart played with, if you've ever smiled through pain, just to prove you're okay, then please stay with me till the end. Like, subscribe, and listen closely. Because this story isn't just mine. It's every woman who loved too much, too softly, too deeply, and finally learned to love herself instead. His name was Arham. I met him on a rainy afternoon, the kind of day when the world feels both beautiful and lonely. I was sitting in a small cafe, working on my laptop, pretending to be busy, when he walked in. I don't know why, but everything about him felt intentional. His smile, his voice, the way he said my name when I introduced myself. It all felt like a scene written just for me. He wasn't just charming. He was attentive. He remembered things I said. My favorite coffee. The book I was reading. The color I said reminded me of peace. In a world where everyone is too distracted to really look at you. He noticed me. And that was enough to make me fall. I thought I was being careful. I'd been hurt before, betrayed by promises and fooled by smiles, but Arham made me believe. This time was different. He said all the right things at all the right times. And when someone says, "I'll never hurt you," with such conviction, your heart wants to believe it, even when your mind whispers otherwise. We became inseparable. Morning texts, late night calls, plans for a future that felt like a dream. He said he wanted to meet my mother, that he could already imagine our life together, our home, our little routines. And I believed him, because love makes even the smartest hearts foolish. But slowly, the colors began to fade. It started with small things, a message left on read. A call that went unanswered, a tone that didn't sound like before. Then came the excuses. I'm busy. I fell asleep. You're overthinking. Each time I felt him slipping away, I tried harder. I blamed myself. I thought maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe I was too emotional, too sensitive. And that's how emotional manipulation works. It convinces you that your pain is your fault. One night, I called him. No answer. Then again and again. Finally, I saw his status. He was out with friends, laughing. The same smile that once belonged to me was now shared with the world. I stared at my screen until my reflection blurred with tears. I whispered to myself, he's just busy. He'll call. But deep down, I knew something had changed. Days turned into weeks of confusion. He became distant, cold, unpredictable. Sometimes he'd be the Arham I fell for, gentle, warm, protective. Other times, he'd be someone I didn't recognize, irritated by my presence, dismissive of my feelings. I started walking on eggshells, terrified that saying the wrong thing would push him further away. And then, one day, he did. He ended it with a single message. I just need space. You deserve better. That's the kind of line that sounds kind, but it's just cruelty dressed as compassion. I begged him not to leave. I know I shouldn't have, but I did. I told him I'd wait, that I'd understand, but his silence was louder than any goodbye. Days passed, and the man who once couldn't go an hour without hearing my voice vanished. I became a ghost haunting my own phone, checking for messages that never came, replaying voice notes just to hear him say my name. I stopped eating, stopped laughing, stopped living. Everyone told me, you'll get over it. But how do you get over someone who made you forget who you were before them? I thought love was about giving. I gave everything, my time, my care, my patience, my heart. I thought if I loved him enough, he'd remember why he loved me. But love doesn't work like that. You can't love someone into loyalty. You can't beg someone into staying. Months passed. He never came back, but his absence stayed. It followed me everywhere, like a shadow. And I carried it quietly because pride is a strange thing. You don't want people to know the one you loved broke you. So you smile. You pretend you're fine. But inside, you're a graveyard of moments that once felt alive. Then one evening, I saw him again. I was walking out of a bookstore when I heard his laugh. That same laugh I used to love. My heart stuttered for a moment. I forgot how to breathe. He looked the same, confident, effortlessly charming. And beside him was another girl. He introduced her as a friend, but I saw the way she looked at him. I knew that look. I once wore it. He smiled at me like nothing ever happened, asked how I'd been, as if I hadn't cried myself to sleep for months because of him. That's the thing about heartbreak. It changes you, but the person who caused it, they stay the same. I forced a smile. I told him I was doing great, and for the first time, I realized I didn't owe him my pain anymore. That night, I went home, sat in front of the mirror, and really looked at myself. My eyes were tired. My heart was heavy. But there was something new. Strength. Quiet, steady, unshakable strength. I made a promise to myself that night. I would never let anyone make me feel that small again. And so, I rebelled. I stopped checking his social media. I stopped asking why. I stopped trying to heal the version of me that loved him. Instead, I started creating a new one. I began journaling, writing letters I never sent. I traveled alone for the first time. I learned to sit in cafes without feeling like something was missing. I discovered peace in solitude. Healing isn't poetic. It's messy, exhausting, and slow. But with every tear, something inside me shifted. One day, I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about him in weeks. That was the day I knew I was finally healing. But life, it has a strange way of bringing closure when you least expect it. Months later, I got a message from him. Just one line, "Hey, I've been thinking about you." My hands trembled. My heart raced. It's strange, isn't it? How the same person who broke you can still make your heart skip a beat. He said he missed me, that he made mistakes, that he realized what he lost. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Part of me wanted to scream, to tell him how he destroyed me, how I begged for a love that never existed. But another part of me just felt nothing. Because when you truly heal, revenge doesn't look like anger. It looks like peace. I didn't block him. I didn't curse him. I just replied, "I hope you find what you're looking for." And that was it. But the real revenge, it came slowly. I started achieving things I once thought I couldn't. I found a job I loved. I surrounded myself with people who valued me. My laughter returned, not the forced kind, but the real one that comes from peace. Meanwhile, he started showing up everywhere, liking my posts, replying to stories, trying to start small talks. The same man who once ignored me now couldn't stop noticing me. That's the thing about karma. It doesn't always come crashing down. Sometimes it just lets them watch you bloom without them. He tried to come back, said he'd changed. But the truth is, I had to, in ways he could never understand. The girl who once begged him to stay was gone. The woman standing before him now didn't need him anymore. I smiled, thanked him for reaching out, and walked away, calm, steady, untouchable dot. And as I walked away, I felt something shift inside me. Not bitterness, not pride, just freedom, because he played with my heart. But I played with his peace by finding mine. And in the end, that's the most beautiful revenge there is. You know, peace doesn't come all at once. It arrives quietly, in pieces. Some days you feel strong, like you've moved on, like you've closed every wound. But then there are days when one memory, one scent, one random song takes you right back to the pain you thought you'd buried. That was my life after Arham. Healing wasn't a straight line. It was a dance between remembering and forgetting, between missing him and hating myself for missing him. But I learned something in that chaos. Pain doesn't disappear when you avoid it. It fades when you face it. So I faced it. I stopped running from the hurt. I stopped pretending I was okay. I cried when I needed to. I screamed when I had to. I let every emotion exist instead of fighting it. And slowly, the storm inside me began to quiet down. There was a day I remember clearly. The day I deleted our pictures. It wasn't planned. I was scrolling through my gallery, and suddenly, there he was. His smile. My smile. Our smiles. I stared at that photo for a long time. It didn't hurt like before. It just felt distant, like looking at someone else's life. I selected every picture and hit delete. No hesitation. No tears. Just release. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in months. 6 months passed. I had a new routine now. Work, coffee, journaling, late night walks under the sky. My world had color again. And even though loneliness sometimes whispered in the dark, I wasn't afraid of it anymore. Then one afternoon, while leaving work, I heard someone call my name. That voice, I'd know it anywhere. Arham. He looked different this time. The easy confidence he used to carry, it wasn't there anymore. His eyes had a weight, the kind of tiredness you can't hide behind a smile. He smiled anyway. Hey, long time. I nodded, keeping my tone light. Yeah. Been a while. We stood there for a few seconds, surrounded by noise but lost in an awkward silence. Then he said, "Can we talk? Just for a bit." Part of me wanted to walk away. Another part, the one that still sought closure, said yes. We went to a nearby cafe, the same one where we met. Funny, isn't it? How life takes you back to where it all began, just to see if you've learned your lesson. He started talking about his work, about how life had been complicated. I listened, detached, almost like I was watching a stranger. Then he said something that caught me off guard. "I miss how you used to care. No one ever loved me the way you did." I didn't know what to say. There was a time I would have melted at those words, but now they just sounded hollow. I looked at him and said softly, "That's the thing, Arham. You only realize the value of peace once you've lived in chaos." He went quiet, and for the first time, I saw guilt in his eyes. Real, unfiltered regret. He said, "I was stupid. I thought I'd find better, but I just found emptiness." I wanted to be angry, but all I felt was pity, because while he was still chasing what he lost, I was already standing in what I found myself. He asked if we could start over, not as lovers, but friends. I smiled. Friends don't break each other the way we did. That day, I walked out of that cafe with my head high. The air felt lighter, my heart calmer, because that was the moment I realized closure doesn't come from their apology. It comes from your acceptance. A year passed after that encounter. By then, I had started working on something I always dreamed of, my own art studio. It started small, just me, a few canvases, and a rented corner in a shared space. But passion has a way of turning small beginnings into beautiful stories. People began noticing my work. A local magazine featured one of my paintings. Then an art exhibit invited me. And slowly, my name started meaning something outside of heartbreak. I was healing through creation. Every stroke of color on my canvas was a piece of my soul reclaiming itself. I painted pain. I painted peace. I painted growth. And people felt it, because real art speaks from wounds that have learned to breathe. One evening, at my first solo exhibition, I noticed a familiar face in the crowd, Arham. He was standing quietly, looking at one of my paintings, a piece called Unheard Goodbyes. It was a portrait of a woman sitting near a window, half her face hidden in shadow, her eyes reflecting both love and loss. He turned to me, eyes soft, voice barely a whisper. "It's beautiful." I smiled politely. "Thank you." He took a deep breath. "Is it about me?" I looked at the painting, then at him, and said, "No. It's about who I became after you." He didn't say anything after that. He just nodded slowly, almost painfully, and walked away. And that's when I realized something profound. Revenge doesn't always look like revenge. Sometimes it looks like living so fully that the person who broke you can't stand how brightly you glow without them. Weeks later, he started reaching out again. Texts, calls, even showing up at my studio just to check in. I ignored most of them, not out of anger, but because I simply didn't care anymore. But one night, I answered his call, maybe out of curiosity, maybe closure. I don't know. He said, "You seem happy." "I am." I replied. He hesitated before saying, "I'm not. I thought I would be, but everything feels empty now." And I knew that was his punishment. Not being hated by me, not being ignored, but knowing that the peace he destroyed in me, I found again without him. He tried to explain how he changed, how he learned, how he wanted to make things right. But you can't rebuild a bridge that someone burned with their own hands. So I told him, "You taught me something, Arham. That love without respect is just manipulation in disguise. You wanted control. I wanted connection. That's why we were never the same kind of lovers." Silence. Then a small, broken, "I'm sorry. I know," I said, "and I forgive you." But forgiveness isn't an invitation. It's a release. He didn't reply. I think that silence was him realizing that no amount of sorry can rewind time. After that, I never heard from him again. A few months later, I stood in my new studio, my own space. My dream turned real. My paintings hung on the walls, sunlight spilling through the windows. It smelled like hope and paint and quiet triumph. And I smiled because this was my peace, my revenge. I had built a life so serene, so fulfilling, that there was no room left for resentment. People often think revenge is about making the other person suffer. But I learned it's about making yourself so content that their existence or absence no longer matters. He once played with my heart like it was a game. But I played with his peace by becoming everything he said I couldn't be: stronger, freer, and untouchable. Sometimes I still think of him, not with anger, but gratitude, because without his betrayal, I might have never discovered my own power. He taught me pain. I taught myself peace, and in that exchange, I won. It's strange, isn't it? How life keeps moving even when you feel like it shouldn't. How the world stays loud and bright while your heart quietly rebuilds itself in the dark. Years passed. Not many, but enough for the pain to turn into something softer. Something almost beautiful. I no longer thought of Arham every morning or cried myself to sleep. I didn't flinch when I heard his name, and I didn't secretly hope to see him again. He had become a story, one I had already finished reading. But sometimes, late at night, I would sit by the window, look at the stars, and smile at how far I had come. Because there was a time I thought my world ended when he left. But it didn't. It just began without him. By the time I turned 28, my art studio had grown into something beyond my imagination. What started as a small corner had turned into a full gallery. People visited from other cities. Collectors reached out. Magazines featured my work. But more than fame or success, what made me proud was peace. That quiet satisfaction of waking up every morning knowing I built this life from the same ashes that once buried me. I even started mentoring young artists, mostly women who, like me, were trying to find themselves again after being broken. I told them, pain isn't your enemy. It's your paintbrush. Use it. I had learned to transform my wounds into something worth looking at. And just when I thought that chapter was behind me, life, in its quiet, ironic way, decided to test my calm again. It happened one afternoon. I was invited to speak at a creative conference, something I'd never done before. I spent days preparing for it. I was nervous, but excited. When I walked into the hall, there were hundreds of faces, some familiar, some new. And in the crowd, sitting in the third row, was Arham. For a second, my breath caught. He looked older, quieter, a little worn out. His hair had a few strands of gray now. His smile was faint. But his eyes, those eyes still carried a story. I didn't let my expression change. I stood on stage, took a deep breath, and began. I talked about art, about healing, about how creation can save you when love fails you. I shared how every piece of my journey, even the painful parts, had shaped me into who I was. And as I spoke, I saw him watching me, not with pride, not with familiarity, but with regret, the kind that eats you slowly, in silence. After the event, he approached me. He waited until everyone else left. Zara, he said softly, you were amazing up there. I smiled. Thank you. He hesitated, then continued. I've been following your work. I'm proud of you. There was something sincere in his tone, something humble. He wasn't the same man I once knew. Or maybe he was, but life had finally humbled him. I'm glad you're doing well, I said gently. He nodded, then paused. You know, I still think about us sometimes, about how I ruined something real. I didn't respond. He looked at me, searching for something in my eyes, maybe forgiveness, maybe a sign that I still cared. Do you ever miss me? He asked. It was a cruel question, not because of what it meant, but because of how softly he said it, as if he was asking for mercy. I thought for a moment, then said the truth. I don't miss you, Arham. I miss the person I was when I loved you. The innocence, the hope, the way I believed in forever. But she's gone now, and I've made peace with that. He looked down. I guess I deserve that. And for the first time, I saw tears in his eyes. Not because I was cruel, but because he realized he couldn't reach me anymore. Not emotionally, not even with guilt. He whispered, you really did move on. I smiled softly. Yes, and that's what you taught me, to let go when love becomes poison. We stood there in silence. The same silence that once broke me now felt like my strength. He said goodbye, and I nodded. There were no hugs, no promises, no lingering glances. Just closure, simple, clean, quiet. As he walked away, I felt light, because for years, I thought I needed him to regret losing me. But in that moment, I realized I didn't need his regret to validate my healing. I had already won long before he even knew he lost. A few months later, I got a letter, a real one, handwritten, sealed, and without a return address. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was from Arham. He wrote, I've tried to move on, but no one feels like you. I keep searching for peace, but it feels like you took it with you. I know you'll probably never reply, but I wanted to say, I finally understand what I did to you, and I hope someday you'll remember me kindly. I folded the letter and placed it in my drawer, not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder that sometimes the people who once broke us eventually carry the weight of what they've done. And maybe that's what poetic justice looks like, not revenge, not hatred, but peace on one side and unrest on the other. He played with my heart once. Now, the silence of my peace played with his. Life moved on beautifully after that. I traveled to new cities, met new people, laughed without fear, loved without desperation. Not because I forgot what happened, but because I remembered and still chose joy. One evening, I stood on the balcony of my apartment, watching the sunset paint the sky in gold and orange. I thought about everything: the girl who cried in the dark, the woman who rebuilt herself, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing she made it through. That's the thing about heartbreak. It doesn't destroy you. It introduces you to the version of yourself you were always meant to become. I whispered into the wind that night, "Thank you for leaving, Arham." Because if he hadn't, I might have never met Peace. And Peace, she's far more loyal than love ever was. Now, when people ask about my past, I smile and say, I used to love a man who taught me everything I never want again. There's no bitterness in my tone, only gratitude. Because life isn't about punishing those who hurt you. It's about becoming someone so complete that their absence doesn't echo anymore. He once played with my heart, but in the end, I played with his peace, not through revenge, not through hate, but by mastering the art of letting go. Because sometimes the loudest revenge is silence, and the deepest healing is peace.